Welcome to Not for Pie Eaters. I'm John Dougal. For the last several videos, we've been discussing controlling behavior. And we started all of this off with a verse in Genesis where, after Adam and Eve had sinned, God told us the curses that would be ours due to our transgression. And one of the curses is a woman's desire to control her husband. There's no way to sugarcoat this. Controlling behavior is a nasty behavior. And both men and women have their sins, and this one just so happens to fall in the women's court. That's it. There are a lot of ways to control someone, and today we're going to talk about a common method, manipulation. There are lots of manipulation techniques, and I actually have no idea how women learn these things. And it's not that all women learn them and not that all women do them, but certainly there are women who are more steeply immersed in controlling behavior than the rest. And even the guys that I know that have pretty good marriages occasionally have to deal with this. It's just something that's in a woman's nature since the fall, and she feels it's perfectly fine to try to control her husband. It's almost as if it's instinctual and just sort of a natural flow out of her. So it's worth our while to learn a bit about it, because if we don't, then this is just something we'll have to put up with, where if we actually know some things about it and understand it, then that gives us a position where we can have a more rational discussion and try to find a way to accommodate one another. But the sad fact is that most men are just absolutely oblivious regarding how women pull off this method of controlling a man. And it happens over and over and over again, and the guys just never seem to figure it out. Wouldn't it be better to see it and understand it beforehand? I've read several books on the whole subject, and we're going to look at some of the information from one of those books. But kind of as a precursor, the better way to look at it is that manipulation is like a form of martial arts. If you were to take two guys and they could be equal size, equal fitness, equal athleticism. And if you threw them both in a ring, but one of the guys has zero fighting experience and the other is a third-degree black belt in some form of martial arts, you know what the outcome's going to be. It's going to be a slaughter, and the non-fighter is going to get hammered. Well, that's exactly what's going to happen with a man. If a man and woman gets thrown into a ring, the relationship ring, where the man is just utterly oblivious about manipulation and the techniques that are used, he's going to get bloodied, and in the worst cases, he's going to get absolutely used. So how is a young man supposed to learn these things and learn how to defend himself? Do we just get into a relationship, get abused, and then learn the hard way? And it flabbergasts me that there's no educational process for this. And why is it that each generation, the men are relegated to ignorance and then having to learn the hard way if they learn at all? Fathers, they teach their sons so many practical things, how to use a hammer and a saw, how to change the oil in the car, how to interact with other men, simple little things like you never sit down and shake another man's hand. But they'll never teach their sons a damn thing about women, and why that is, that's just nuts. Well, and then the church, in my estimation, isn't any better. Despite the clear curses in the book of Beginnings in Genesis, where it says that a woman's going to try to control her husband, and yet the church is oddly silent on this matter. The Bible is an amazing resource. It includes wisdom from thousands of years with some really smart people telling you all kinds of things that help you, navigate life. And the church focuses on salvation through Christ, and that's 100% fine. It's excellent. It's an excellent starting point. But do we just let young men get pummeled and only talk about salvation when there's so much guidance in the scripture that could help a young man out? I'm clearly not happy about that, and it's part of the reason why I created this channel. Well, I came across this book on various techniques of manipulation. It's called In Sheep's Clothing by George K. Simon Jr. It's not a book about how to take advantage of others, um, but it's a book that makes you aware of the motivations for manipulation and then also the techniques that are used. In this fashion, you can see a blow coming and then learn how to block it rather than get your clock cleaned. In the book, manipulators are called covert aggressive personalities, and the reason they call them that is that men are used to overt aggressive behavior, in your face kind of a thing, because when men have a conflict, if it goes unregulated, everybody knows where it's going to end up. It's going to get you know an increasing amount of escalation, leading to potentially, a fight with blows. But that's not the way of a covert aggressive. They do things surreptitiously. They do things where it's easy to see. Um, it's not easy to see that it's being manipulative. Well, a manipulator wants something. And the primary characteristic of covert aggressive personalities is that they value winning. Now, I'll throw a caveat on there. They don't want to win at absolutely everything, because there's no point in that. But they'll use these manipulative techniques when they want to win for something that's important to them. Okay, and that's the point. You need to understand that it's not going to get used all the time. Just like a martial arts expert doesn't go around beating up everybody that comes across their path. The techniques are only used when there's stakes that mean something. Well, the stakes could be to avoid personal responsibility, where the man is constantly mopping up after a woman's utter lack of responsibility. Wouldn't it be nice to go through life like a little girl where daddy fixes all the mistakes, and that, her life is just nothing but a life of comfort? That's just one example. It could be another. It could be, winning at the games that mothers like to play with other mothers, the game called, who has the best family. That game is won by the kid's achievements. And, oh, my kid's on a select team. Your kid plays in a rec league. My kid got better grades. My daughter is a princess. Yours is ugly. They'd never flat out say that, but you can get the implications, in women's conversation. It's also a game where, hey, who flashes the most success? Who has the coolest SUV? Does your family drive a Range Rover, or do they have a 10-year-old Kia? And who takes the best vacations? Our family just got back from a scuba trip in the Caymans. Aren't you going camping soon? Well, what if the families, are equal? And what if the woman is just manipulating the family, the man, into shelling out money he doesn't have to buy these things so she can play this game? And those are examples of maybe some of the motivations where winning is the goal, and the goal is getting her something that she values. And don't think it's just mothers. Unmarried women play the same games too. If a woman has a desire to win by using a man and she lacks a bit of conscience, she's going to be manipulative. I've known several unmarried guys in relationships where the dumbass, made her car payments for her, where he paid off her credit cards, only for her to go out shopping and, and charge up all the more. He thinks he's being nice. He has no clue he's just being used. Well, a manipulator is determined, cunning, and sometimes ruthless, not only to get what they want, but also to avoid being seen as the people that they really are. So there are red flags you can look for. Does she have areas in her life where she always has to win, at least in the things that matter to her? And the important thing to note is that a woman does not feel bad if she's manipulative. should have said that the other way around. If a woman is manipulative, she doesn't feel bad about being that way. And it's important to understand that this is not a repressed conscience. It's a lack of conscience. A conscience that has something missing and feeling bad about manipulative behavior, it doesn't even happen. She feels good when she wins. Well, in the book, In Sheep's Clothing, it starts off with the naivety that's necessary for a manipulative person to get the upper hand. If you've got somebody who isn't naive, they're going to see it coming. But for men, oftentimes when they idealize women, they don't see it coming, and the women know this. And the book then goes on and describes sort of this lack of character, comparing and contrasting traits of neurotic and character disordered, behavior in an individual. You could look at neuroticism and being character disordered as being on a continuum, just a solid line, where on one end you've got neurotic, and on the other end you've got character disordered. Well, no one lives, or nearly no one lives, at the extremes, but people fall somewhere along that continuum. And a more ideal person is going to be right in the middle someplace. But if they're a little bit more on the character disordered side, then they're going to have a bit of an impaired conscience, maybe a little, maybe a lot. And that's kind of where the manipulative end of things comes in. And since the fall, with women wanting to control their husbands, I would say in that spectrum, or in that realm, that women are generally a bit more on the character disordered side because the controlling behavior is pervasive. Not to the extent that it's an all or nothing, all women are this way, but it's too many. And so men need to be aware of it. Well, in the book, there are lots of techniques presented, and it's just like in martial arts. And think of the techniques as like a martial arts kata or a dance. A proficient practitioner can seamlessly move, from one technique into the next and then back again, and it's just smooth and natural. Well, it's the same way with a good manipulator. They'll switch from one technique to the next, to the next, to the next, and poor guy's just oblivious. Well, I'm not going to sit there and rehash everything in the book. I'd love for you to go out, get a copy, and then read it. But I'll give you an example. Okay, let's assume that there's a husband and a wife, or two people living together, whichever way you'd prefer to see it, and they've been together long enough. They've actually got a budget, and they try to adhere to it for the most part. Well, it becomes apparent that there's a pretty large cost overrun in the budget. And maybe she spent way too much money on clothes recently. Well, the first technique she could use is called minimization. And minimization is the aggressor's attempt to make a molehill out of a mountain. She might say something like, well, I only spent money on some clothes I needed. Never mind that it was $2,000 that she spent just yesterday, in addition to the $1,000 she spent the previous weekend. And the entire yearly budget was blown just in a couple of weeks' time. Well, then she says, well, it's not like I shop every weekend. Minimization. And then diversion can be employed for, or some other means of evasion. Well, you just went fishing last weekend. Was that in the budget too? Or am I the only one that has to follow the budget? And then she could vilify the victim, which could be something like, in this case, the real victim is the man, because he's going to have to make up for the shortfall, potentially. You're always trying to control me. Is that how you think a relationship is supposed to be? Just like how your father is always trying to control your mother, vilifying the victim. And then denial. Besides, it was only $2,000. And when was the last time I bought clothes? As far as I know, we're still on budget for my clothing. I almost never go shopping, not like when I was single. And then what's the guy typically going to do? He's going to put on his Mr. Fix-It hat. Oh, let me look at my spreadsheet here, and I'll tell you exactly how much you spent. It's like, oh, moron. She's trying to win, and you're trying to play the truth game and Mr. Fix-It. So he's got his spreadsheet out, and he's got every expense categorized, showing that she's gone over budget. And then what does she do? She uses the technique feigned confusion. I don't know how anyone can understand this thing. I only bought what I felt was reasonable. People need clothes. I need clothes. And besides, everything I bought was on sale. You should be happy. We saved money. And then she switches to shaming. People like they shop like this all the time. It's called living. How come we don't have enough money for clothes? And never mind that she's capable of understanding budgeting, and that's why Mr. Fix-It's just oblivious. She's smart enough, and she's also smart enough to play these little games, and by feigning confusion and by shaming, she's going to wear him down and win. But Mr. Fix-It, he brings up all the clothes, in the last few months, and then she employs what's called selective inattention. I don't remember buying that. If I bought something, it's not in my closet. I must have returned that, but your spreadsheet doesn't show that. This is just an example of how this game can go on and on and on. And if you continue to play, you're going to continue to lose, because she's got a plethora of techniques she can pull out to keep you off balance. And the whole while, you're oblivious to the fact that she is trying to win, and you think you're going to thwart that with reason and logic and calm discussion. You need to recognize, no, she's manipulating you, or at least trying to. And that's where you need to say, wait a second here. You think I don't see what's going on? I see exactly what's going on here. You're playing a game, and I'm not playing a game. You know what the budget is, and so then you get down to the point of what? It always has to come out with a form of saying no. I am not going to tolerate this. And you can come up with whatever argument you want. I know better, and I will not put up with this. And so this shortfall is on you. You're going to have to make it up. And if she doesn't make it up, there needs to be consequences. All the leading up to a point where she's going to have to make a decision. What's more important to her? Controlling you or having a relationship. And if she chooses controlling you, then she's chosen that she doesn't really care about you anyway. So there you are. And the important thing in this book, in Sheep's Clothing, is to recognize that the expert is not the author of the book. Sure, he's quite astute. The real expert is the person who can actually do the kata, that can do the dance, that can seamlessly flow from one technique to the next, to the next, to the next, and then back again, all the while keeping the poor rube, off balance, losing and defenseless, and not understanding that her job in her mind is to win. Well, so what do? This video could be looked at as just a promo for the book, in Sheep's Clothing. And I'd suggest every young man or any person that hasn't ever come across this kind of information, go out, get a copy. It's an easy read. If you're like me, you can easily finish it in an evening. And then, ask yourself the question, what do you want? Do you want a relationship with this kind of a woman? And if the answer to that's yes, then you need to find a way to bring about some reasonableness to the relationship, so that it's not a matter of controller and the person being controlled. A relationship isn't feelings. Love is not doing nice things. Love is not turning the other cheek and then getting taken advantage of. If you truly love someone, then you're going to want to do what's best for them. And what's best for a controlling woman is to make her accountable for her behavior and to say no. Years ago, I worked with a guy, and it was in another state, and we were doing contract engineering work. And one of the guys that I was working with, he'd specifically taken that job to get himself out of state from where he lived. And it was one of the steps in his plan to say no to this girl he was with. And he left her at home. He was not happy with her crazy spending and her credit card debt. And he told her in no uncertain terms that, hey, if she didn't pay off the debt herself, the relationship's going to be over. And that she's got to have to be responsible because he's not going to live his life bailing her out. So he gave her the opportunity to change her behavior. In my estimation, that was love, giving her a chance and calling her out on her bad behavior and all the controlling games she was trying to play. So he did not put on a Mr. Fix-It hat and try to fix her or fix the situation. He instead said, fix the issues that you created or we're done. Personally, I doubt that she changed her behavior, and I lost track of the guy, but I doubt their relationship lasts because I doubt she was going to change. She's just going to try to trade him in for some other guy that's stupider than he is. So my recommendation is get a copy of the book, learn, become wise, and that realize that in a relationship, it's in the nature of women to control their men, but some far more so than others. And, little nuisance things, you find a way to roll with that, but there's a point where it's not a nuisance, it's damaging, and you need to recognize that. It's a man's job to lead, and so part of the job of being the man and part of his job in loving his woman is to be aware of what's going on. And there are good women out there, and best if you find one, And if you have more of a thorny character, well, then you need to recognize it. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and consider giving it a like and sharing it with a friend, especially if it's somebody you see as being able to benefit from this information. Simple acts like this really help the channel, and I hope you can learn and live well. Thanks for joining. Cheers.